Hello, and welcome back to the Sync Society podcast. Today, I have my laptop with me. In today's episode, there are a few stats and facts that I want to reference, and I am not a science nor a doctor. I'm just a girl, and so I want to make sure I get those right. Today, I wanted to share a little bit more about something that I did touch on in the first episode that I think was really important and changed my life and was a really intense season, but I think ultimately has been so beneficial for me in the end and has caused me to take a step back, live my life, and live in alignment in a way that I maybe wouldn't if this did not happen to me. So I will not be elusive any longer. I'll tell the story and talk a little bit about how we got there. Before we do that, can we shout out to these peonies that you can probably see in the frame? It is May, which is the short-lived peony season. So if you're able to get your hands on them, 10/10 recommend. Probably my favorite flowers in the world. Though they are rare, they're short-lived, but that just means you will not see me without peonies in my home during peony season. I will savor every moment. Okay, back to the episode, back to what we're here for. So I mentioned that one of the reasons I started the Sync Society, or one of the reasons I have such a passion for sustainable career paths and ambition aligned, is because of a really pivotal moment that happened to me a few years into my career. And I mentioned the burnout break that I took and the diagnosis that kind of followed along with that, but didn't really share the behind the scenes story of what was happening in my life, my career, and my body during that time and during that season. Let's take it all the way back to around 2020, 2021. I'm a few years into my consulting career. I'm firing on all cylinders, as I always have and always did. When I came through school, I was very hyper focused, maybe to a detrimental extent, on making sure I was getting the highest GPA I possibly could. I was involved in every executive board of every organization I was a part of and really wanted that impressive resume and those accolades. And when that translated into my career, into more of a high performing culture, I wanted to put my best foot forward. And that can also sometimes be the challenge of being a high performer in your early career days. Being a workaholic and working crazy hours is not something that is unique to the early days of your career. That can definitely happen throughout time, especially if you're an executive or in one of these more demanding industries. However, in those early days, I think you feel so much less of an ability to set boundaries for yourself because you really want to prove yourself. You don't have a personal brand yet at the company you're working at. You don't necessarily have the trust or the authority to set boundaries in the way that would help you drive a sustainable career path. And more often than not, you're getting the grunt work and the types of things that nobody else wants to do. And it's a little bit overwhelming because you're getting used to what it looks like to be in corporate America and have a job and be a professional and translate from school into a working environment. And so when I was doing that, again, wanting to put my best foot forward, exceed all expectations. And what's challenging about this as well is there always was a milestone where, okay, now it's graduation. Okay, check. I have that season of life complete. But when you go into the workforce, it's kind of forever, not forever, but up until retirement. And I was not looking at the early days of my career as a sustainable path. I was simply just looking at right in front of me, how can I accelerate, climb the corporate ladder, get the best year-end rating, have everyone think that I'm the top draft pick to be put on their team at all times. And what came with that were absolutely received that affirmation and was on many projects that absolutely were a result of my hard work and dedication. But I was completely checked out from my body and how I felt. So I knew how it looked. I knew the numbers of my utilization. I knew the year-end ratings I was receiving and the reviews and how it felt to be in demand as a team member. But I was completely disconnected from myself. And what I mean by that is sleep was not a priority. I would consider myself a little more health focused. So it wasn't like I was eating fast food all day, every day, but I was perfectly fine with having 2 to 3 coffees a day, having coffee before breakfast. I'll tell you more about why that matters in a moment. Maybe coffee for breakfast. I was not prioritizing protein in any way, and maybe even wasn't eating enough in certain seasons, especially not as a woman, to fully nourish myself and keep all my hormones happy. And lack of sleep, under extreme chronic stress. And the thing about stress and cortisol is it is our body's natural response to danger, biological design and adaptation to help you in moments when you need to be running away from a bear, for example. However, when you have this false urgency that comes in corporate America that we need to turn this around in 24 hours, your body is experiencing that same stress over and over and over again. And you may have heard of fight or flight or rest and digest. I think I lived that entire decade or so of my life in fight or flight. I didn't know what it felt like to truly rest, to truly disconnect, to not be constantly stimulated. And there's a weird thing about it where you almost feel addicted to the grind and addicted to that feeling of constant adrenaline. But at the same time, it is depleting your body. And especially for women, I want to emphasize this, especially for women, we were not designed to be under chronic long-term stress, to ignore our bodies, to undernourish ourselves and not sleep. Okay, now we know a little bit about where I was coming from and how I was treating my body. At the time, I was not considering the long-term effects of what that would mean or what that would look like. And it started a little bit around 2020, 2021, when I started to have a few symptoms that I just felt like maybe this isn't normal. So a few examples of that were my cycles were kind of all over the place and not a consistent rhythm. I started breaking out quite a bit. I felt extremely moody. The mood swings were insane. I would feel so joyful one day and the other day feel like I didn't want to be around anybody and didn't want to go anywhere, do anything, just feel super irritable or just down and didn't feel like myself for sometimes like a week out of the month or more. Also having constant energy spikes and crashes, insomnia, and kind of having that feeling like I could never quite come down. And so I'll fast forward a little bit, but essentially was diagnosed with PCOS in 2021. I mentioned this as well in the first episode a little bit, but it actually affects 10 to 15% of women, and there's an increase in diagnoses over time. Interestingly enough, hot off the press over the past week, it actually was renamed to PMOS, which I will tell you what both of those acronyms stand for. So PCOS is polycystic ovarian syndrome. It's a little bit of a misnomer because you do not need to have cysts in your ovaries to be diagnosed with this. And also, that does not truly classify or encompass what this condition is. It says here in this medical journal that it affects 1 in 8 women. So quite a few people. That's more than 1 in 10. It's quite common. And the reason that the name was changed is PCOS was inaccurate because it was implying that cysts in your ovaries are really what defines this condition. And also because of that, if you're maybe experiencing a few symptoms and you're researching online, you may think, oh, this doesn't apply to me. But really, it's more of a nuanced condition. And something I will say as well is I know multiple women in my life who have the same condition and experience completely different symptoms. I personally feel a little bit more affected on the mood front. I know some people struggle a little bit more with irregular cycles or weight gain. Some struggle more with blood sugar crashes, those areas of metabolism, hormones, endocrine related systems and functions that you just have a little bit of a heightened sensitivity and are a little bit off. Because also the fact of the matter is, and what I wanted to speak on today as well, is there is a way to manage your symptoms while it is a chronic condition and you can't make it go away. It is something that is absolutely manageable. Doesn't mean I never have an off month, but I feel like I've been able to implement some measures that really make a difference for me. and allow me to perform at my highest capacity, knowing that I want to take care of myself in the process. And that is a huge piece of where my passion for sustainable career came from, because I know I'm not alone in this. And even if you're not experiencing any chronic condition, women's biology is very nuanced, and it's important to be attuned to your hormones and where you're at in your cycle. And maybe in a future episode, we can kind of break down the different phases of the cycle and how that might influence you in life and work and all the areas, because there are definitely ways that you can take the cycle and how your hormones are evolving over the month and kind of use it to your advantage or your superpower, or know how to schedule your social outings, your big presentations and conversations around times when it might suit you best. So, all that to say, the new name PMOS is actually, I saw a TikTok, it was kind of funny. They said, at least I can now call it piss me off syndrome. But really, it is, it can absolutely be frustrating. And I think it's important to find the community and sometimes the humor in these things, where it's obviously not something that you want to be going through, but it does impact so many women. So the new name of PMOS is supposed to overcome the misnomer that PCOS was and help with more accurate diagnoses, and also to appropriately treat the condition for what it is. Like I said, it's more of a metabolic, endocrine, but also hormonal condition, and there can be a higher risk for conditions like diabetes, heart disease, more prone to brain fog, mood swings, irregular cycles. Again, everyone experiences the symptoms differently, and everyone is an individual. So wanted to talk a little bit about the foundations. A lot of people will try to sell you a supplement that says this is going to fix everything, but in my opinion, the things that you can do that are free or almost free are probably going to set you up for success and also be more sustainable in the future. Do you really want to spend $100 a month to have a supplement for the rest of your life? And maybe it's just a band-aid solution. I don't know. But I will say that a lot of these things can be applicable to any high-performing woman who wants to be more in tune with her body. But again, if 1 in 8 women are experiencing PCOS and you feel like any of the symptoms or things I just described to you potentially resonate, I would absolutely encourage you to get it checked out. When I received the diagnosis, it was emotional because I felt so frustrated. In that moment, I remember feeling like I let myself down, or I brought this on myself because I wasn't listening to my body and I was pushing and powering through, and I shouldn't have done that. The reality of the situation is there maybe wasn't anything I could do to keep this from happening. It is often said that, especially when it comes to different chronic conditions or diseases, that genetics load the gun and your environment pulls the trigger. So being under constant stress and inflammation probably wasn't the best thing. Who's to say if that would have come from powering through my career or something else in life? And so I have to release that and just let it be what it is and know that this is something I'm experiencing. But I've had really powerful conversations with women who are experiencing the same thing. I've had great wins and breakthroughs. And I'm not saying it's always easy and that everything's perfect and I've never had a symptom. That's not what I'm saying. Unfortunately, there are months that are harder than others. If I'm under more stress or haven't been able to maintain my routine to the extent that I usually like to, I might be experiencing more symptoms. And that's just reality. And there's grace for that. But wanted to share a few of the things that I've implemented over the past 5 or so years since that diagnosis that have really changed my life and may help you as well. One of them is food. One of the most prevalent challenges, especially with women with PMOS/PCOS, whatever you want to call it, is insulin resistance. And this is what can be a precursor to diabetes. The long story short of it is basically balance your blood sugar. It helps with mood stability, maintaining your weight, getting great sleep. And the funny thing of the inverse of that is if you get a night of poor sleep, it actually can influence your insulin and your glucose and everything the following day. Again, that was not a super scientific way to describe it, but essentially it's all connected. And so for me, what that looked like was eating real whole foods. I've described myself as a component-based chef meaning when I'm cooking or preparing a meal, I like to look at what is the protein source, where the greens or vegetables, fiber of some kind, and then a carb, which typically is either something like fruit or potatoes. Keeping sugar as minimal as possible. That does not mean that I'm not having a sweet treat. It just means being cognizant of any added sugars, even things as simple as ketchup or dressings. It's always helpful to kind of look out and make sure that those are not having large amounts of added sugar. One of my biggest passions is eating 3 square meals a day. It is so important for women to eat breakfast. Your cortisol spikes in the morning, your body's natural way to get you up and around, but you don't want it to spike so much that it's now influencing all of your hormones and your blood sugar, which will happen if you're not eating breakfast. So breakfast is a way to tell your body you're safe, you're okay, you're ready to start the day, you have fuel. I mean, think about it. You were fasting all night, so you need fuel now to start your day to get your brain as sharp as possible and get things going. Again, opting for more of a savory breakfast, or I really like to do a protein smoothie in the morning with some berries, which are low glycemic. That is the perfect thing to do. So those are just a few of my tips and tricks. If you're bopping around or you're going to have a meal later than anticipated, put a protein bar, a meat stick, something in your purse for the road. Also caffeine. I actually did a stint there for a while where I did decaf, which was very challenging to start, but then I felt like I almost didn't need it anymore. And that is helpful to get your body in more of that rest and digest, not being dependent on a stimulant to get you up and going. However, I do like some coffee every now and again. And so I now do like a half and half beans of decaf and regular. It's minimal caffeine as opposed to no caffeine, but that's been helpful as well. And also trying to limit caffeine in the afternoon so that it doesn't influence your sleep. And that's what we can talk about next. Sleep is so important. I will admit, in the season of launching the Sync Society and a lot of new things happening at once, sleep has been the pillar that has definitely slipped a bit. Only for a season. We're focusing on it. We're trying to get back in the swing of things, but that's me admitting I am sharing what's worked for me, and that does not mean that I'm always perfect. For women specifically, it's really important to get between 7 to 9 hours of sleep, and also to consider the fact that the amount of time you're spending in bed doesn't necessarily equate to the hours of sleep that you're getting. So I have an Oura ring, and it basically shakes out to, if I'm in bed for 7.5 hours, then I'm probably getting between 6.5 and 7 hours, losing around 30 to 60 minutes of time that technically, yes, I am in bed, but I'm not in any state of sleep during that time, just from taking a minute to fall asleep or tossing and turning throughout the night in some capacity. That's typically been how it is for me. So not only making sure that I'm in bed for 7 hours, for example, to get 7 hours of sleep, but probably trying to stay in bed for 7.5, 8 hours minimum to get the minimum amount of sleep that I need. And that just sets you up for success. It helps minimize brain fog. It's your body's way of going through the detoxification process. And that's really important for minimizing inflammation, helps you be your best self. It keeps your blood sugar more steady throughout the day. And so it's also, if you're working out, that's when your muscles are recovering. So sleep is everything. I think it's one of the most underrated things that you can do for your health and well-being. If you're biohacking out the wazoo, taking every supplement, working out every day, but you're not getting adequate sleep, that could easily be the culprit of why you're not feeling the best. So sleep is important. Another pillar that is super important is exercise. And for women with PCOS, it's a little bit contentious. There are some people who say only do slow weighted movement, don't do any cardio at all because that's going to spike your cortisol. There's another camp that says you should do cardio to lose weight and or keep your heart healthy because, again, like I said, there can be challenges with heart health. My 2 cents on this whole situation: I have had seasons of life where I was obsessed with cardio, doing spin class, running, and that's all I was doing. I've had seasons of life where I was only lifting, and I have seen the maximum amount of benefit by doing consistent lift heavy weights, slow weighted strength training 3 times a week getting in cardio about twice a week, and then having like a fun day. I think sometimes we need to work out just for the joy of moving our bodies and not to over optimize the situation. To me, that could be yoga, that could be Pilates, that could be a dance class. It's just whatever makes you happy. Also, getting in as many steps as you can, not in an over obsessive kind of way, again, but consider how a sedentary lifestyle may be affecting your blood sugar, your mood, your overall health. And in New York City, it's easy to get in steps. But if you're somewhere where it's not so easy, or you're working from home, or you're in a place that's not super walkable, at least go for a 20-minute walk per day. Again, it doesn't have to be crazy. It doesn't have to be perfect. Something is better than nothing. But just getting outside, getting the sunlight, and moving your body just a little bit has insane benefits. So that is for anyone. I wanted to talk about just a few other items that can really improve your life. At first, I carried a lot of shame with this condition and not wanting to talk about it because it felt like a failure. It felt like I am not the most optimal employee or hard worker because I have to manage this condition. But there are certain appointments that I have or boundaries that I need in order to take the best care of myself. And I am unapologetic about those things. I'm always getting my work done. I'm completely present. But what that means is if I do need to step away for some kind of appointment, or there were times when I was in consulting where I knew I wasn't going to be able to go outside while the sun was still out. This is in the winter. And so I would coordinate with my team so that I could get outside for 30 minutes and come back just to get daylight because that's so important. You don't have to broadcast if you're experiencing a condition. I think it's really personal and not something that anyone necessarily needs to know. But I also think it can be really powerful when you share where you're coming from and what you need to take the best care of yourself. And it could be an inspiration to other people around you. So just wanted to share that as well. The last thing people talk about is supplements. I think there are a handful of supplements that almost anyone could benefit from. The ones that I most consistently hear, again, disclaimer, I'm not a medical professional, but across different research studies, it seems like the general consensus is that humans can all benefit from an omega-3 supplement, which can help reduce inflammation, improve brain fog, heart health, vitamin D with K2. That's just the most absorbable form. And that's something that most people are deficient in, and I think especially in the winter. And the last is magnesium glycinate, which I like to take at night. And that's just something that helps relax you. And magnesium is something that I think quite a few people are deficient in. So it can be helpful to add that back in. Beyond that, it really depends on your condition and yourself. This is not sponsored in any way, but actually almost 2 years ago, I did the Function Health Labs, which is a very comprehensive set of labs. It tells you your biological age, it tells you across many different dimensions, over 100 biomarkers in the standard package, and you get 2 blood tests a year. And it's not through insurance, it's just a flat fee you pay through HSA. But I'll drop a link in the show notes if you're interested. That was really helpful for me to see where am I at with all of my heart related markers? Where am I at with my inflammatory markers? Where am I at with my hormones? And the last time I checked, it was very enlightening to me that because I have all these foundations, I probably am healthier than most people just by nature of how I feel myself and how I've been very focused on my health now for 5 years, which makes a lot of sense. So for the most part, pretty much every single biomarker came back really strong. Pretty sure my biological age was 16 and I was 27 at the time, 28. So yeah, it was kind of insane. Anyway, so if you're going to look at supplements, I think it's always helpful to look at what your individual body actually needs as opposed to listening to whatever the internet tells you is the latest and greatest supplement. I have often found that frustration with the wellness industrial complex, if you will, where why are we trying to always sell a new supplement or a new gadget to tell you that this is what you need to improve your overall health when really there are these foundations of sleep and food and friendships and boundaries and exercise and getting outside and all of these things that we can do for free 99 or close to it that really will make the biggest impact and influence on our health. So overall, wanted to share this more so to talk about a time in my life when I felt like I was trying to be firing on all cylinders, but really I kind of describe that chapter of my life as a time when I kind of feel like I face planted, but the only place to go from that is up. And I learned so much about how to become more in tune with my own body, how to unapologetically ask for the things that I need and set boundaries, and how to take care of myself and have these open and candid conversations with women who might be experiencing the same thing. I think one of the most freeing things in the world is to talk about a struggle that you're going through, especially one that takes up so much brain space, and just sit across the table from another woman who says, "You too," because you're also experiencing the same thing. So, why am I sharing all this? One, a little bit more about me and my story, things that I'm walking through, how it impacts and influences me. The second is so that maybe some of the women listening to this don't feel so alone. And lastly, because no matter who you are, what you're experiencing, being in tune with your body and ensuring that you are not chasing success at the expense of your health and well being is so paramount. There's a quote that I just looked it up. Apparently, it's from the Dalai Lama. I was unaware, but I have heard this where it says, "Man sacrifices his health in order to make money. Then he sacrifices money to recuperate his health. So do not let that be you." I will always say, you can be exceptional at your job. You can achieve what you desire to achieve and feel proud about the work that you do while taking care of yourself. I think that is the most important thing. And your health is not something that you can get back once you diminish it. And for those who are living with chronic conditions, it can feel like you can't show up 110%, and maybe that's the point. I'm so glad that you have joined for this episode of the Sync Society. Next week, I'll be dropping an episode with one of my dear friends who I often call my big sister, who is a dietitian. She has her own business and was a really big champion and support system for me as I was walking through my diagnosis. So I'm really excited for you to hear that. If you've enjoyed this episode, would you please share this with one woman in your life who you think would benefit from this episode? And would always appreciate a comment to let us know which part you enjoyed the most or which topics you're looking forward to hearing more episodes on. And I can't wait to see you next time.